The first generation of equipment was, and it's worth sharing this with you because it is an evolution, both in the technology associated with the technique, but also an evolution in technology itself, which mapped and paralleled things like the evolution in mobile phones. So this is a resonance frequency analyzer made by Schlumberger and connected to a PC and an oscilloscope, cumbersome, heavy, and very slow. I took this equipment to the Branimar Clinic, and I spent many months working in Gothenburg at the university with Thomas Albrechtsen, Lars Senneby, Bertel Freeberg, and other very fine clinicians. And this is a pair of Wellington boots, which reminded me that actually the measurements took a long time to make on the patients, and they weren't always entirely safe because of possible electrical leakage. But that was it. We didn't have a problem. It was just something to be aware of. And these were early measurements. And it was very, very promising that we actually could track an increase in our resonance frequency of analysis with time. So we could measure biological changes of a mechanical environment with this technique. And we could also identify potential failure, which was also equally important, because by identifying potential failure, we can avoid it and we can make things successful. Because very often, if we saw a potentially failing implant, there were no clinical or radiographic signs of that failure occurring. So that was a real sign. And again, what we also observed, and I'll come back to this again and again, is that there are differences between the mandible and the maxilla. And we wondered, why is this? And there are so many studies which mirror this. So it's not just an aberration. What it's due to is the path of osseointegration is different in the mandible and the maxilla, largely because the cortical trabecular ratio and the level of bone to implant contact is different. There is a far higher cortical trabecular interface and ratio in the mandible than there is in the maxilla. So in the maxilla, we will see a lower initial reading because the bone in the mandible and the implant in the mandible is more stable. But with time, we see a greater increase because we see more new bone formation and more new bone laid down. And this slide is mirrored in so many different studies. And similarly, in studies in grafted maxilla, we could identify potential risks, and there was a clear delineation, a clear statistically significant delineation between potential failure and successful implants.